For 51-year-old Suzanne Simpson, life in Olmos Park, Texas was good. She was a successful luxury realtor, a devoted mother to 4 children, and well-loved in her community. But on the 6th of October, 2024, after attending an exclusive party at a private members club, Suzanne vanished. A neighbor heard screams from the woods behind her home. Her husband reported her missing the following day. And then, just weeks later, investigators made a chilling discovery. Suzanne had told her banker months earlier that if she ever went missing, they should look for her in a lake. Suzanne Clark Simpson graduated from the University of Texas at Austin in 1995 with a degree in communications. She had spent 6 years working at Dell Computers before moving into real estate, a career she had now built over 13 years with Nick's Realty Company. Her colleagues said she had an unparalleled insight into the San Antonio property market. She knew what made it tick. She would call clients from Europe in the middle of the night if they needed her. She did everything she could to make sure the job got done. Her sister-in-law, Marnie Simpson, who co-owned Nick's Realty, said there were no down days for Suzanne. She had a cheerful demeanor and saw the positive in all things. She was an open book, never pretending to be something she wasn't. She was kind, approachable, and loving. Suzanne was a lifelong San Antonian. She was incredibly active, having completed 22 marathons, and she had even qualified for the elite Boston Marathon. Running was a massive part of her life. She would run about 8 miles every day, but most importantly, Suzanne was a mother. Her 4 children were aged 20, 18, 15, and just 5 years old. Friends described her as a bright, smiling supermum who managed everything from kindergarten playdates to high school lacrosse games. Her eldest daughter, Chandler, was studying fashion design in Paris and New York. One friend said Suzanne was the kindest, sweetest person. Everybody loved her. She couldn't think of anybody who could say anything bad about her. Suzanne and her husband Brad had been married for 22 years. They lived in a century-old bungalow in Olmos Park, one of the toniest neighborhoods in Texas. It was a small, affluent community where the crime rate was typically low. A see something, say something neighborhood, as one police officer would later describe it. Brad Chandler Simpson stood 6'5". He was 53 years old and worked as a licensed real estate agent and investor in real estate and construction businesses around Central Texas. He had attended Alamo Heights High School and graduated from the University of Texas, Austin in 1994. Over the years, he had been linked to 15 Texas companies, though most had gone out of business. He had worked at Cotter & Sons, a real estate firm, from 2002 to 2012, and had been partners with the owner's son, James Cotter, in a series of business ventures over the years. But Brad had faced significant financial troubles. American Express had sued him twice between 2019 and 2020 for over $25,000 in unpaid credit card debt. He had been involved in contentious legal disputes with former employers, including a years-long dispute with Cotter & Sons that had reached the Texas Supreme Court. Those who knew him described Brad as incredibly confident, but also extremely jealous. One friend would later tell investigators that Brad would track Suzanne's phone location. He was controlling. In August 2024, just 2 months before Suzanne disappeared, she made an outcry to her personal banker at Frost Bank. The banker, Gabriella Spicia, would later tell investigators that Suzanne had revealed Brad was physically abusive. She said he regularly took away her phone. And then Suzanne said something chilling. She told the banker that if she went missing, to look for her in a lake. Suzanne also explained that after Brad confiscated her phone, he would tell their children that she had lost it. Another friend told authorities that Suzanne knew Brad tracked her phone. She knew him to be extremely jealous. Despite these red flags, there were no police reports, no protective orders. The abuse remained hidden behind the walls of the Olmos Park estate. Suzanne's mother, Barbara Clark, would later say she knew of at least one prior physical altercation between the couple. She said it wasn't part of their life or his behavior. She was shocked. Barbara had developed a plan for Suzanne to move in with her. The youngest child would attend school in Barbara's neighborhood, but Suzanne vanished the night she called to report that Brad had hurt her again. She never heard the plan. It was a Sunday evening. Suzanne was wearing a short dark dress and tall tan heels. She had her sandy blonde hair partially tied back. At around 8 p.m., she and Brad took their 5-year-old daughter to a party at the Argyle, an exclusive 170-year-old members-only private dining club in Alamo Heights. Multiple witnesses observed a verbal altercation between the couple that became disruptive. According to what their daughter would later tell a school counselor, Brad pushed Suzanne against a wall at the party. He hit her in the face. He hurt her elbow. Suzanne and their daughter left around 8:30 p.m. Between 8:40 and 8:51 p.m., surveillance footage captured Suzanne and her daughter shopping at an H-E-B grocery store. At 9:15 p.m., Suzanne called a family friend saying she was coming over. 1 minute later, two things happened simultaneously. Suzanne called her mother Barbara to report that Brad had assaulted her. She said she had pain in her arm, back, and neck. At the exact same moment, Brad accessed their AT&T account and suspended Suzanne's mobile phone service. At 9:25 p.m., surveillance confirmed that Suzanne had arrived at her friend's house in Alamo Heights. By 10:22 p.m., the Find My app showed her phone was back at the Simpson residence. This would be the last known location of her iPhone. Between 10 p.m. and 11 p.m., a neighbor who lived across the street heard arguing outside his bedroom window. It grew progressively louder. When he looked outside, he saw Brad and Suzanne in a physical fight in the front garden. The neighbor told police that Suzanne was attempting to get away from Brad's grasp as he tried to pull her downwards. Brad was clearly attempting to keep her from running away. Then Suzanne broke free. She ran towards the wooded area east of the home. Brad chased after her, trying to grab her. The neighbor went inside to get a torch, and then he heard it. 2 to 3 screams from the brushy wooded area. These were the last sounds anyone ever heard from Suzanne Simpson. Around midnight, the neighbor heard Brad's black 2019 GMC Sierra pickup lorry start and leave the residence. 1 to 2 hours later, the lorry returned. At 11:09 p.m., FBI forensic examiners would later determine that Brad began cycling his phone on and off in lockdown mode. This pattern was rarely seen. It was typically done by a person who wanted to avoid detection. He continued this pattern through the next day. At 12:33 a.m., just over an hour after the screams, H-E-B surveillance showed Brad's lorry with a large ice chest in the cargo bed. At 7:15 a.m., Suzanne's phone had its last activity. The coordinates placed it in a business car park in Olmos Park. The phone was never recovered. At 7:53 a.m., surveillance from Howard Early Childhood Center showed Brad dropping his daughter at school. In the lorry bed were at least 2 white rubbish bags with red string and what appeared to be a large ice chest. Then, at 9:12 a.m., footage from a Whataburger drive-through camera in Kendall County captured perhaps the most damning evidence. Brad's lorry contained 3 white rubbish bags, a large heavy-duty rubbish bin, an ice chest, and a large bulky item wrapped and secured in blue tarpaulin, covered with a metal firewood rack on top in a manner to conceal and weigh the tarpaulin down. The arrest affidavit would later note that investigators believed there was an unknown object concealed within the blue tarpaulin due to its shape and size. It stated that criminals commonly conceal, transport, or disguise their victims in the manner described to purposely avoid detection. At around 9:53 a.m., Brad's geolocation data placed him at a Home Depot in Bourne, Texas. surveillance showed him purchasing 2 bags of quick-rete cement, an orange construction bucket with a lid, a box of 32-count heavy-duty rubbish bags, a 30-ounce bottle of Clorox disinfectant spray, and insect repellent. He paid in cash, which was not his usual method. In the car park, he approached an unknown male and asked for directions to the nearest dump in Bourne. After leaving the store, Brad entered lockdown mode again, cycling his phone on and off. Between 10 a.m. and 11 a.m., location data placed Brad's lorry near the Kendall County Solid Waste Facility. Minutes later, he stopped at a petrol station in Bourne. He purchased petrol and 2 one-gallon jugs of water. The 3 white rubbish bags were no longer in the cargo bed. Still present were the blue tarpaulin, the firewood rack, the rubbish bin, and the ice chest. Brad had changed shoes. He was no longer wearing sandals. He now had on dark, cowboy-style boots. Location data then tracked him heading west towards Bandera and into Medina County. He spent approximately 13 minutes there. His phone continued cycling on and off. At 1:41 p.m., a number plate reader captured Brad's lorry returning to Bourne. The blue tarpaulin was no longer visible. The firewood rack had been repositioned. At 3 p.m., the school called Brad. Their 5-year-old daughter hadn't been picked up. This was highly unusual. Suzanne picked her up every single day. At 3:27 p.m., footage showed Brad picking up his daughter. Only the ice chest and heavy-duty rubbish bin were visible in the lorry. The firewood rack was now gone. At 4:07 p.m., Brad was at the Bubble Bath car wash on San Pedro. Surveillance showed him cleaning the driver front side and the rear left passenger side of the passenger compartment. Police would later find dried cement splashes in the rear passenger compartment and the lorry bed. Only the ice chest remained. All other items had been removed. Brad did not report Suzanne missing. The entire day passed. His wife had completely disappeared. She had failed to pick up their daughter. He made no report. At 9:57 p.m. on the 7th of October, nearly 24 hours after Suzanne was last heard from, a friend called Brad expressing concern. She learned he had not called the police. She told him she would file a missing persons report herself. Just 14 minutes later, Brad left a voicemail for Olmos Park Police Chief Fidel Villegas. He said he had not seen his wife since 11 p.m. the previous night. He claimed she had lost her mobile phone at HEB. This was contradicted by mobile phone data showing the phone at home at 10:22 p.m. and the fact that Brad himself had suspended her service. Brad failed to show up for a scheduled follow-up interview with police. He relocated to his ranch property in Bandera County. He appeared to be separating himself from his family. At 4:35 p.m., he sent a desperate text to James Cotter. "If you're in Bandera, can you haul ass and meet me at your house? I don't have much time." Cotter responded that he'd be there in 40 minutes. Brad's next text was explicit. "Okay, make sure and leave all that shit in the pump house, especially that gun." At 8:31 p.m., Cotter texted Brad, "Get over here. I won't tell anyone. You're my brother." Brad had created 2 notes on his mobile phone during the 8th of October. They were titled, "This Next Life and Last Will and Testament." In the notes, he apologized for physically assaulting Suzanne in August 2023, and again on the 6th of October 2024. He also called his brother Barton and apologized for all the problems he had caused. At 1:30 a.m., Brad was arrested off Interstate 10 East in Kendall County. He was charged with assault, family violence, and unlawful restraint. He had lacerations and bruises on his arms and hands. He did not appear surprised. He showed little to no emotion about his wife's disappearance. He immediately invoked his right to a solicitor and remained completely uncooperative throughout the entire investigation. A search of the Simpson home revealed an indentation on the wall at the bottom of the stairway. It hadn't been there previously. It was consistent with the 5-year-old daughter's account that Brad had pushed Suzanne against the wall. Police found 1 bag of cement. Brad had purchased 2. They found the box of heavy-duty black rubbish bags, the heavy-duty rubbish bin, and the metal firewood rack. The box of rubbish bags contained only 28 bags out of 32. The housekeeper confirmed the family used white rubbish bags with red handles, exactly the type seen in Brad's lorry. In a locked gun room, police found multiple firearms, including an unlicensed short-barrel rifle, which led to federal charges. On the 9th of October, Texas Rangers discovered a burn site on the family's ranch property in Bandera County. They found a burnt laptop and multiple mobile devices, 3 mobile phones belonging to Brad, all destroyed by fire. On the 21st of October, police searched James Cotter's home in the exclusive Dominion development. An anonymous witness, who had previously provided reliable information, told investigators exactly where to look. Behind a wall-mounted television in Cotter's bedroom, concealed in a hollowed-out area, police found a fully automatic AK-47 rifle. Cotter had retrieved it from Brad's weapons vault on the 8th of October, 2 days after Suzanne disappeared. He was arrested and charged with tampering with evidence and possession of prohibited weapons. His bond was initially set at $1 million. Then, in December 2024, came what would become the cornerstone of the prosecution's case. A grand jury indictment revealed that Brad had knowingly concealed a reciprocating saw, an electric handheld motorized saw capable of cutting through metal and bone. On the 5th of December, 2 sources informed local news that law enforcement had notified Suzanne's family. Suzanne's DNA was found on the reciprocating saw Brad had attempted to conceal. 1 month after Suzanne's disappearance, Brad was formally charged with murder. The total bond was set at $5 million. The charges included murder, tampering with evidence with intent to impair a human corpse, tampering with physical evidence, and possession of prohibited weapons. The potential sentence was 5 to 99 years, or life in prison on the murder charge alone. Lead prosecutor Casey Sandoval said they didn't have the benefit of a body for a medical examiner to examine, but that didn't prohibit them from filing the case. The law doesn't reward people who are disposing of the bodies of their victims. On the 3rd of December, 2024, Brad's defense solicitor Stephen Gilmore filed a motion to quash the indictment. He argued the indictment was vague, indefinite, ambiguous, and uncertain. Without specifying the manner of death or the specific act that killed Suzanne, they couldn't mount an adequate defense. Without a body or a medical examiner's report, he claimed the evidence was inadequate. On the 22nd of April, 2025, both sides argued the motion before Judge Joel Perez. Prosecutor Sandoval countered that the case law was clear. The state did not need to prove how Brad murdered Suzanne. They only needed to prove that Brad intended to kill Suzanne and caused her death, not the specific mechanism. On the 29th of April, Judge Perez denied the motion to dismiss. He ruled that prosecutors had alleged enough to let the murder charge stand. The case would proceed to trial despite no body being found. Texas Rangers, Olmos Park Police, FBI agents, and multiple county sheriff's departments conducted extensive searches across 3 Texas counties. They searched the wooded areas where the neighbor had heard screams, Interstate 10 near where Brad was arrested, and Brad's ranch property in Bandera County. 1 year later, in October 2025, Suzanne Simpson's body has not been located. Texas DPS spokesperson Dion Cockrell said they won't stop looking. Whether it's a year, 2 years, there are instances where it's many years later where remains are found. There's always a chance that she might be found. On the 5th of November, 2024, their 20-year-old daughter Chandler posted a statement on Instagram that went viral. "My father took my mother's life in a state of rage and control. She said women in Alamo Heights were told to keep their mouths shut. This is the time to speak. Speak for my mum." Chandler and her siblings had given statements to police that contradicted Brad's story, leading to the search warrant that uncovered the indentation in the wall. On the 22nd of September, 2025, Judge Perez ruled that both sides had sufficient discovery to proceed. The evidence compiled totaled 5 to 6 terabytes, including surveillance footage, phone records, and forensic reports. Brad remains in the Bexar County Jail in administrative segregation, spending 23 hours per day in his cell. Pretrial hearings are set for the 20th of January, 2026. The trial begins on the 13th of February, 2026. The prosecution's case includes the neighbor's eyewitness testimony of the struggle and screams, Suzanne's DNA on the reciprocating saw, surveillance footage tracking Brad's movements with wrapped items, the cash purchases of cement and rubbish bags, the burned electronics, the concealed AK-47, and Brad's written confessions to prior assaults. Based on the timeline and evidence, investigators believe Brad attacked Suzanne shortly after she returned home that night, between 10 and 11 p.m. The neighbor witnessed the physical struggle in the front garden before Suzanne broke free and ran towards the woods. Brad chased after her. The screams that followed were the last sounds anyone heard from Suzanne. Investigators believe Brad killed her in or near those woods, likely through strangulation, then brought her body back to the home. The large, bulky item wrapped in blue tarpaulin seen in his lorry the next morning, combined with Suzanne's DNA on the reciprocating saw, suggests he dismembered her remains. His methodical movements over the following hours, the dump visits, the cement purchase, the repeated trips between counties, indicate an elaborate effort to dispose of her body and destroy evidence. Legal experts have called it a strong circumstantial case. 1 year after Suzanne Simpson disappeared, her body still hasn't been found. Chandler continues to advocate for domestic violence awareness, determined to be the voice of her mother until she is found. Texas DPS continues searching. As the community awaits the trial, they seek justice for Suzanne even without the closure of bringing her home. Please don't forget Suzanne. And if you have any information about Suzanne's whereabouts, please contact the Olmos Park Police Department at 2108 222 000.